So my first question for you actually now is, what do you think the average time for research paper publication is in general? What do you think? Any guesses? Okay, yeah. According to international publishing companies, the average time varies from 3 months up to 1 year. So that means there are some fields that actually on average take 1 year to publish one research publication. And obviously before they make a decision and submit that paper and wait until to hear back, it may take 1 year, possibly more. So in order to avoid that, we should put more effort into designing the paper before and selecting the appropriate journal for us. So today's session outcomes hopefully will be that you will leave with clear understanding of what kind of article you are designing, or maybe in the future you will be working on. Also consciously choosing the journal and audience for your potential publication. And you will work on a small draft technique that's called PGQ. So that's the conceptual core of your future paper, let's say. A few words about myself. I'm Gulsum Kusharova. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And besides that, I'm a science educator, and I run several research projects from Ministry of Education and NU. I have been running all publication as Scopus Index, and I've won some awards in the past. So first of all, let's understand the publication strategy. Yeah. So sometimes some researchers, some students may assume that only one article can be written on one research project that they're working on. However, in reality, a single research project can be a basis for multiple publications if you understand the types of articles and their purposes. So what other types of articles are out there? There are a lot, and there are a few of them on the slide. So what are the types of publication? Journals can accept different types of papers. So the most common ones that when you get started with a research project is that you get familiar with is probably a literature review, where you gain general information about certain field, and it's a review of existing papers. Besides those, there are theoretical conceptual articles, methodological, where you propose some certain new method perhaps, empirical research, where you make a study, whether it's experimental or modeling, and you publish your main results. Perspective papers, where generally it's for senior researchers, where they have enough knowledge in a certain particular field, and they propose their perspective on the future development or the current state. Teaching articles, let's say some of us are educators, and if we notice some teaching trends, we may want to publish about those in teaching articles. Case studies, a lot of them you see. In which field do you guys see in case study articles? Psychology, medicine, a certain patient had certain, let's say, disease or outcome, and it's very rare, and it could be published as a case study, particular case study. What kind of type you choose depends on the type of main idea of your work. Are you studying or you found some new methodology or methods of doing certain experiment? Are you just publishing your main results of a big study? You are suggesting some original interpretation of this existing theory in a new way, in a new light, and possibly you're doing new understanding of the data that has not been published before. So what I'm bringing up to is that any publication starts with a decision. Like anything in our life, right? We have to decide first. You have two types of choice when you decide to publish. The first one is you write the article, and then you find a journal that's suitable for the article. The second choice you have that you choose a journal and then write for that journal. So because what I suggest is the second method, yeah? Choose a journal and then write for that journal, not vice versa. Because the audience of that journal determines the structure of your article. So not where to publish, but what am I designing the article for? That's the question that you should aim for. Why? Because the selection of the journal matters for many reasons. Not only because of the audience, but also how deep you can go in terms of the theory or the introduction part that you are working on. What are the requirements for methods that in typical articles that are published in that particular journal? What is the formatting, figure size, number, and so on, style, and so on. So the second choice is what I always suggest, and I try to do that myself as well, after many years of trial and error in my work. So students, even if your supervisor makes the final journal call, still understanding the target changes how you write. If you are being supervised and you have no idea on what journal to shoot for, that's possibly something that you should speak to your supervisor and make the selection beforehand. The rule of 3 journals states that not one journal, potential journals for a manuscript, but 3. So 1 is ambitious, a high impact factor, realistic and safe. This reduces the fear of rejection. We established that it's very important to know the journal aim and so on. Could you please distribute? Architecture of a scientific article. Any article should have one claim, major goal. Yeah. We formulate argument is where we formulate the claim. Second thing is a problem. This claim that you are formulating, that you're proposing, must address a significant problem. And the higher the significance of your problem that you're addressing, the higher the impact factor, potential impact factor, or the rating of your journal publication, the journal could be. Yeah. And third, why we publish is that we offer certain evidence, whether this evidence is obtained through your experimental work, modeling work, or some literature review work. The evidence is the data that supports this argument that our paper proposes. So one article has one message or the claim. This does not, if you're writing a dissertation, that's different. Dissertation's purpose is to defend the work, and most likely this work has taken the time, has been developed over time. And in dissertation, the main audience is the committee. So you have to defend your work in front of the committee. While publication's purpose is to contribute to the scientific field, certain field that you're working on. And there, the audience is the research community. So in dissertation's case, one large project usually contains several arguments. But in publication's case, you have to have one argument, one claim. Yeah, so that's the difference. Out of dissertation, we can make several papers. Yeah. So now, if we establish that any scientific article has the main claim, has the problem, and evidence, right? So if we have a look at our handouts in the second block. Okay, thanks for sharing. So there's a technique that they call PGQ. That's essentially problem, goal, and research questions. By answering these questions, what it allows us is to expand the outline and the abstract. So for an article to be publishable, before writing the text, we need to define the problem, the argument, and scope of the research. Every article requires a new conceptualization. As I said, from one dissertation or from one research project, we can get several articles. However, when you write a dissertation in terms of article, any article would need all over again new message and new framework. So even if the project is already designed, for each article, you reformulate the problem again, you refine the focus of it again, you redefine the contribution again. What is PGQ structure? It is one page for understanding. Before writing the article, we need to answer several questions. And in one or two sentences, if we answer those, then we are very close to envisioning the paper structure already. So the main thing is the problem. What is the specific problem? So in case of, for example, the earthquake, the housing structures, made to withstand earthquake, perhaps there is a problem that there are no efficient or cost-effective or sturdy materials. That's the problem currently. I'm just making up. Yeah, perhaps that's the problem from the literature. What is the specific problem? What is the gap in knowledge? And we need to answer the question of what is missing in this current literature, in this field, in order to answer these questions. So then, additionally, sometimes if we provide some context to answer questions where, when, and in which discipline, that gives a context to our reader. Logic and justification. Why is this important? Based on which sources? And conceptual framework, that's more for social scientists, for which theoretical perspective are you looking? That's why I put it in the brackets. In natural science, we don't tend to use a particular framework. Second is research goal. What exactly is research aimed at? And which questions address the problem. To see it more from a practical way, let's have a look at an example. The context. Doctoral students experience anxiety when receiving feedback. Problem. Emotional aspect of academic writing is insufficiently studied. That's a problem that exists in this field. That's a gap. Conceptual framework. Set within a framework of an ethic of care. The purpose of the research is to investigate the emotional experience of doctoral students when receiving feedback. So this paper says the aim is to investigate how doctoral students perceive these emotions, right? What are the emotions after they receive feedback from supervisors? How to achieve the aim? This aim is through answering research questions. So that's where the Q comes from. The Q is we need to ask several questions, research questions, in order to make our claim. So in this case, what emotions arise Second question the study asks is, how are they interpreted? Third question, how do they affect writing? So that's an example of applying PGQ structure. If we expand a bit and 1-2 sentences about the key results, we'll already have a structured draft of an abstract ready to go. So the key takeaway is an argument is formed when you take a position on the problem. If you have a look at any abstract, that's how it's made up. Yeah? The main thing is the problem, second main thing is the aim, and third is the question. So any kind of paper has this kind of structure, and if you add a couple sentences on methods and key results, you will already have the abstract of the whole potential paper to go. So in this exercise, lots of times students ask me what we all probably know, the basic structure of any research article. It is introduction, methods, research, and discussion. Yeah. A lot of times when I'm asked how long I need to write each section and so on. So in terms of content, the results in discussion is the major core of your paper. This is where your contribution, what your findings are, your discussions. So in this case, this is the chance for you to shine, to put the novel information in the sections. Saying that, introduction and conclusion also are important. They have to be purposeful and tight. Why introduction specifically? Because introduction usually is the first thing that the reader reads or the editor. And if the paper does not catch attention at the introduction, they may not proceed to the other section. Yeah. So that's the chance to introduce this problem, this difficulty, that's pressing issue that exists in literature. That's the section. But generally in research articles, it's not more than 1 or 2 pages. Conclusion, sometimes some papers don't even have conclusion, and usually it's short for experimental or for empirical research. It's much shorter. On figures, I always suggest to have key figure because again, we said that we start reading from introduction section, and if you add a key figure to it, key figure is the figure that represents the whole research. So by looking at it, you get right away the idea of what this research is going to be about. So if you complement your introduction with key figure, that really increases the chances of being understandable and clear. Now, based on practice, the reality of publication process. So far what we've talked about, these frameworks, how to write, what's important and not, but when it comes to practice, there are some things that we don't study in school or in workshops like this. So the first thing, especially for starting off people who are starting with publications, is that rejections are normal. This is part of an academic career, so never accept it personally. Especially at young age, we tend to take it personally that I'm not good at writing or I'm never going to be a good academic. That's all not your thoughts. This is just part of academic life. Second is, if your manuscript came back with the outcome of revise and resubmit, that's already very, very good. You know the competition nowadays is getting more and more fierce, and getting revise and resubmit, you could count it as already a success, provided you go through all the comments that are provided and address them efficiently. This means that it's the potential. They did not reject your paper. For people who are starting off, the first article is difficult to get your foot into the academic world. So the first article should ideally be in co-authorship. Because we're here in Nazarbayev University, most of you already have supervisors, so this is not an issue. This accelerates entry into the system. So imagine the editor getting a paper from perhaps unknown university, an unknown person where this person's name doesn't show up anywhere on Google search. Then it's just inside they may have some concerns, right, about credibility. But if it comes with co-authorship from somebody already have a publication track, then you may use that as leverage. Fourth is that separate writing and editing. First, create the argument or the major claim that we talked about, then improve the wording. Yeah. So first we need to have like a skeleton of the paper before we start expanding and editing and so on. Nowadays, with the AI tools development, the editing, you see a lot of research articles that specifically state that the editing and proofreading have been done using AI tools, and they cite what kind of AI tools they use. ChatGPT. So it's becoming a norm. Nothing is surprising anymore that researchers also utilize AI tools. In the beginning, when AI just started developing, there was a lot of debate about it. But now the world is shifting towards acceptance of AI as indispensable assistant. Yeah. So, but if you are to use it in editing or proofreading, be sure to cite it in your manuscript. And make strong conclusions, don't just retell the results. So usually the last sentence of your conclusion section should have something more than beyond your paper for future work, or what are the future implications of your. About publications, from practice is that an article must make a contribution. I always like to put myself into any case. If you're going for an interview, for a job interview, try to put yourself in the shoes of the interviewer. In the paper publication process, same thing. Try to put yourself in the editor's shoes. The editor asks themselves two questions. when they accept a manuscript. Why is this paper important? Why is it worth publishing now? And the higher the impact factor of your desired journal is, the impact word plays bigger and bigger role. That's the first thing that the editor would pay attention. Does this paper have an impact? You need to embed the article into the journal's conversation. So let's say we talked about 3 potential journals. Yeah, the ambitious one was the first type. So let's say you're shooting for ambitious journal of your dream. You want to send your manuscript there. Be sure to read the articles of the journal, reference them, continue the discussions. Why you need to read? Because there is some kind of trend between the articles that are published in a certain journal. You will see that they all, after some point, there is an overall similar patterns. Yeah. So it's advisable to look at those that have been already published. Your argument must be clear to you. If you cannot formulate it in 2-3 sentences, you may not yet to be fully ready. So we come back to the major goal, yeah, the main aim of your manuscript. Specifics are stronger than abstractions. Clear statements are more interesting than general reasoning. Yeah. So clear statements meaning sometimes we advise not to have very strong or like this claim. If you are not sure if there are not enough evidence, you say this claim may be suggesting, but try to avoid very strong statements if there is no enough evidence for it, because some reviewers may accept it very critically, that you're making a strong claim without actual justification. So be clear only based on your evidence. The publication sequence, each article should be built around one of these. So new theory, new method, one key result. Yeah. And if you were publishing several articles out of one work, as we started in the beginning, we said one research project may result in several publications, right? Review paper, you may turn your actual experimental work into empirical paper. So if you were to space them out a bit, you can additionally cite let's say you're publishing article 2, you can base your article 2 on article 1 and cite it. Yeah, and it's a natural continuation, outline of your paper or the abstract. So hopefully this workshop gave you some time to think, by answering these questions, to think about your potential paper or perhaps the manuscript that you're working on. And what's important, sometimes we keep delaying things. Yeah, once we make a decision, but then, okay, I'll do it tomorrow, because this process looks so big, and the bigger the process is, the harder for us to start. So what I find useful is to split them into small blocks. Let's say there's a term that's called writer's block, right? You've heard of it, writer's block? No? There's no scientific evidence that it actually exists, but the writers usually call it that they stare at this open white screen and they just cannot write even a sentence. There is a state like that. But it comes from this overwhelming feeling that this big process is waiting for me, so we keep delaying. So when you have to write a lot, try to split it. Let's say in one day, I'll just write 2 sentences. That's it. Like if you were to have that kind of situation, you need to split it into very, very small blocks. Some more free resources on my YouTube. And if you want some 8-page mini ebook that I created, the 3 Habits of Highly Effective Researchers, for those who are just getting started, yeah. And the free workbook that if you were to start this journey of research, what questions you need to answer. If you need these resources, you can find them on my YouTube. You can contact me as well. Thank you.